Okay, and welcome back, and we are in late Jan 1853. I was almost going to say 52, but yeah. And yeah, gosh, 9 months into the war. We last left off in early Jan, where really the plan was just to kind of sit tight. Now, at that time, my plan had been to sit Omar Pasha in Varna, in the town itself, and at the last moment changed my mind and went against that. The reason being is it occurred to me, Omar Pasha's force, if you'll recall, was really in kind of quite rough shape, mostly really badly disorganized, and that's a combination of the fact that he'd been moving almost constantly, engaging in running battles in increasingly tough weather, and certainly marching through snow, ice, and sleet and this kind of thing does really have a serious impact on the morale, the cohesion, and effectiveness of military forces. And that was evident. And by the time we left off, he was in Varna and his force was in pretty rough shape. And my plan was to deposit his force inside the town. Now, if you look at if you hover over, for example, Ahmed Pasha's corps, we can see that the variation of average cohesion increases 0.73 per day. Now, that's impacted by different things: the character of the commander, the overall force commander, the weather in the province. You can see we've got some really rough weather here. And now if we deposit a force inside a town, as we've just done, this essentially billets the force, and we can see that the same force gets a variation of 2.81 per day increase. So yeah, it gives you real advantages. The downside is the force is especially vulnerable. If, for example, Paskovich had moved his army into Varna and was sent to an assault posture, which may have been the case if our force, if they detected that our force was essentially billeted in the town, that means that he surrounds the town and immediately assaults the town. That can result in catastrophic consequences, especially when the kind of posture of your force is compromised, it's very weak, it's disorganized. As such, I kept Omar Pasha out of Varna and had him set basically to evade combat and to retreat if engaged, and that was his posture. He was engaged and he fell back north into Constanta. Now, his force has recovered somewhat, but it is still quite disorganized. My thinking is we're going to give him another fortnight. Further to that, I think this time we are going to be in a position to actually go into the town, and the reason being is because if we set to hold at all costs, we should be in a position, I think. Just going to double check. Yeah, I was just trying to kind of say somewhere, I'm trying to think where there's an indication if a town is especially small. That's actually only if there's a fortress. If there's a fortress that's very small and your force is too large for the fortress, that results in kind of an unnecessary degree of concentration and vulnerability to shell fire and things like that. And I can't quite remember where that indicator is, but it is something that's always very obvious to me when I'm inside a fortress. This is not a fortress, it's just a town. So we're going to billet Omar Pasha's force inside Constanta. This will dramatically accelerate organization and cohesion recovery, not least because Dobruja or Constanta, the region that surrounds the town, is experiencing really tough weather, and this is a feature of warfare at this time. The Russians are still somewhat exposed. I think the likelihood is they're going to make a move north to Constanta. One of the reasons we're going to deposit him in the town is because there is a British force sitting outside the town, and my thinking is that might serve as a discouragement, or at the very least that might engage the Russian force. The hope is the Russian force will fall back. Because of the difficult weather, it's going to take the Russian force much longer than usual to march north. I mean, if we look at Omar Pasha now, if we wanted to move him into Varna, it's going to take 14 days. That's a lot longer. In 14 days, you'd normally be able to march right down to Adrianople or Constantinople in good weather. Or if we tried to move to Plevna, 18 days. We wouldn't even be able to do it in a fortnight, So a combination of his disorganization and poor weather means that he can't really move very far. We've got supplies, there's a port here at Constanta, and in the trade box we've got the Black Sea Trade Squadron, so that can serve to keep his force supplied. But we're going to deposit him in the town. I feel reasonably confident that if that town is surrounded and attacked, he'll be able to hold at all costs, and that should be fine. The thing we want to be really careful of is getting him trapped in a town and having his force compelled to surrender. I should say that also, at the pass of turn, we spawned an additional 2-star, that is to say, Lieutenant General. I guess that's because we promoted 2 3-star generals, and I completely forgot that it isn't the case that they spawn. They're automatically replaced in the first turn. It takes a period of time, so we get kind of 1 spawn per turn. every force in Omar's command actually has a staff commander or a commander and their staff. So we're going to actually send Mehmed Rashid east, and he is going to link up with Riza Pasha's force, and he's going to get command of the independent cavalry division inside Riza Pasha's force. Riza Pasha is now 8 days from Erzurum, and it looks like, I mean, there is a small force in Erzurum. Is that actually in Erzurum, or? So I think that's actually slightly further south. Yeah, that's further south. The cavalry division that was besieging Erzurum has just fallen back to bitless. It's completely isolated, and I get the feeling it is actually trying to move, but the combination of difficult terrain, probably lack of supplies by now, and the weather may actually have just resulted in this force becoming sort of trapped, and perhaps not meaning to. But we'll keep an eye on what happens. I mean, this cavalry force is not in a position to take any fortresses or anything like that. So we've got Riza Pasha's force moving in. It's going to be 8 days to Erzurum. And the idea is, Riza Pasha, again, amazingly, is activated. But once he's in Erzurum, we're going to look to try and pull a bit of a winter maneuver and see if we can move to begin to besiege maybe Tiflis or Erevan or one of these forts, and to really begin to destroy the depots on the Russian frontier, to try and deprive the Russians of the kind of means to conduct further operations against us. And that might buy us a little bit of elbow room next year. We might have been able to release forces from the east to kind of head west. But if we destroy the depots near the border, yeah, this means that the main Russian force, I guess, will have to move north to Grozny or something like that in order to receive supplies. It will take them time to kind of rebuild that military infrastructure. We moved an infantry brigade from Cyrenaica into Solum. It looks like the kind of insurgency fell back. It looks like, I mean, we have kind of a hold now on this situation in Cyrenaica. The situation seems to have stabilized, and there's only a very small force which is not detectable. It may have even just vanished and become destroyed. It was, I think by the time it fell back from Solum, it had about 90 men or 80 men or something on horseback. What we have done is to move this force. We're taking a bit of a risk here. Move this force into Sana, and I feel like I'm about to sneeze. This was set to evade combat, and the idea is we're going to. I mean, this has a small amount of supplies, but we're actually going to deposit this force inside the colonial fort in Sana. Give it some time to recover. This is a bit of a gamble. I mean, we wouldn't want to lose this force. But the idea is to give this force some time to recover inside the fortress, and then basically kind of like sortie into the surrounding region and try and lift the siege. The move was to move from Hodeida and try and slip into the town. It seems like a bit counterintuitive, but inside the colonial fort, we would receive we would be able to recover our cohesion much faster, and I think in a very short sort of span of time we should be able to kind of sortie outside. I mean, supplies and logistics strained here, but we didn't really have any choice. There's nothing more we could do. We don't have an anchorage. We can move very small forces, but we need an anchorage to actually river transport that entire force. And I think if it marched north through Hajez, it would largely be destroyed through lack of supplies anyway. So it's kind of a gamble. There's not much more we can do. It's a kind of last gamble, really, to try and sort of bolster our position in Aden. But that's it, really. In terms of kind of, military moves, I don't think there's anything else. Let me check through. I should point out as well that the River Squadron was completed in Constantinople. We moved that, and the River Squadron has now joined the main transport squadron. The River Squadron has a transport capacity of 12, along with the big kind of force of 40. That brings our transport capacity up to 52 heavy lift capacity. 52 is enough to move any individual army corps. Different kinds of army corps have a different kind of weight. Like a guards army corps is going to be slightly heavier. It carries heavier equipment and so on and so forth than a regular army corps. Counterintuitively, militia army corps do seem to be a little bit heavier than regular army corps. Regular army corps are 40. Militia, seem to be 48. It may just be because they have slightly more men, obviously slightly poorer quality or something like this. I'm not too sure why. But anyway, we now have a lift capacity at Sinop to be able to move any army corps that we generate there to the east, and that kind of serves to offset the fact that we have no railroads. In fact, we could move them east at about almost the same speed as having a railroad, which is quite good. Yeah, I think that's it. The main Imperial fleet is ready to sortie again. Is in pretty good shape, yeah. Resupplied, reorganized. Weather's not great. I know the weather's actually not too bad at sea. If the weather's quite bad over kind of Constantinople when we try and move out, or in the surrounding areas, it can delay us leaving. So, for example, we might have an indication that a patrol's going to take, like, I don't know, 12, 13 days, but it may end up being not the case. It may end up being sort of like 20 days or something, if we're kind of delayed by weather. We're going to take a bit of a chance. We're going to sortie the fleet into the Black Sea, off of Odessa. We'll move from there into the Sea of Azov, and from Azov into the eastern Black Sea, and we'll sit tight there for the time being. As I say, we may be delayed anyway, so that may end up taking 14, 15 or 16 days or something like that. We're still waiting for some replacements, I think. Yeah, some last replacements, and I think it may take another turn for them to trickle through. If not, we will look to build some more kind of replacement parts for our frigates. I should say as well that in order to begin to kind of beef up the firepower for Rita Pasha's army, we have begun the construction of an independent artillery regiment. We're going to probably build a few of these, but over a period of time, send them east to hook up with Rita Pasha, and that will kind of give them the kind of firepower that I think we're going to need to really break these kind of fortresses down Tiflis and Aravan, which is got to be the plan. Of course, there was a Russian army which kind of periodically goes AWOL on the frontier, and again it makes an appearance and then vanishes. It may be in one of these territories, but we just can't see it or something. What is this? An engineer brigade, a Russian engineer brigade. That's interesting. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on things in the east, and we're going to soon be in a position, I think, to actually start kind of really dealing with the Russians on their own terms. Which, you know, we now have a force assembled here that is a proper field command. It's actually an army as opposed to an army corps or an ad hoc force. We've really had kind of scratch ad hoc forces in the east, and we now have a proper command assembled, which is good news for us. Yeah, I should report also, we have a revolt. It looks like a fairly minor sort of revolt, possibly an insurgency that's moved up from the south that's kind of triggered in just outside Tripoli. The town itself appears to be safe. There's no real threat to it. Yeah, and we have a force in place, also a division no less, so this force should be perfectly sufficient to deal with that and give it a short shrift. Beyond that, in terms of our economy, we will have our shipbuilding plant will actually be complete, I'm thinking probably by March, looking at this rate. And yeah, that'll be the second industrial manufactory that we started building that will be complete. Of course, the first was a textile mill. It looks like a fortification upgrade will be finished probably by March as well, and an additional textile shop. And of course, we began the construction of a manufactured goods shop in the beginning of January, or was it the beginning of January, or possibly the very end of December, when the Industrial Revolution triggered. Now, the triggering of the Industrial Revolution opened up a huge slew of kind of manufactories that we could build. This is not the kind of end of the industrial. I mean, like, what the Industrial Revolution is, it's a bit of a bottleneck. It is a qualitative change that opens up. You know, I suppose what it does is it kind of gears the Ottoman economy increasingly towards the idea that its future is based on large manufactories, the centralization of the means of production, if you like, in towns and cities. But what it does do is it leads to a whole slew of other kind of technologies that in turn allow us to build different kinds of manufactories. In some cases, upgrade manufactories that we've already built. Like, we've built kind of almost pre-industrial, almost textile shops. You know, these are factories. These are large centralized factories. They're not small kind of guild or small textile mills that you might find in the early modern period. They are large textile manufactories, but they have a slightly kind of pre-industrial quality to them in some ways. And the development of railroads, for example, and new technologies, and also new techniques and things like this will allow us to upgrade these and significantly increase kind of the productive capacity of these. New technologies then, smokeless powder. This in turn allows us to begin looking at things like gun cotton, which we're going to begin researching. Let's have a quick look at our research. We're not generating quite enough kind of state revenue yet to begin to plough funds and resources. You know, I think percussion cap muskets is important because it is a unique qualitative kind of step. You know, it'll open up. It opens up 28 new units. If you can see on the right hand side the description, it's Description effects: percussion caps contain a shock-sensitive chemical such as fulminate or mercury. Replace the flint, steel, and firing pan of traditional musket firing mechanisms. I don't really know what much that means, to say the truth, but sounds like good stuff. And the fact that it opens up 28 new units suggests that this represents a qualitative change, a significant qualitative change in terms of kind of armaments for our infantry. In terms of our allied deployments, always a little bit bewildering, never quite clear what their plan is. They do seem to have a presence in northern Bulgaria. We've got a small British force kind of screening Sofia, which is very welcome. French force in Salonika and a British force in Kavala. And of course a kind of mixed British kind of force just outside Constanta, New South Wales Field Force and Army Service Corps. This looks like a fairly considerable force. That should be enough to kind of discourage the Russians from moving into Constanta. Yeah, we hope that's the case. Export's pretty good this turn. We're only importing steel and supplies. We couldn't get our mitts on any manufactured goods. That seems to kind of happen in sort of short bursts, where one turn we might acquire 10 or 15 units, and then 2 or 3 turns we'll acquire nothing. Domestic market sales sitting at 63 goods with 238 private capital. Revenue from that. Really good sort of trade balance this last fortnight, but not really by design. We had intended to release as much private capital as we could to get manufactured goods. That said, manufactured goods are sitting at a really nice level at the moment. We are starting to increase steel imports now because our craftsmen generate, I think, 1 unit of steel per turn, and our economy doesn't actually consume any steel. That will very quickly change. In terms of operational costs, I think... No? Okay, manufactured goods shops don't use steel. They use iron, mechanical parts, coal, and capital. At 100%, they will use more of those things as well. But shipbuilding doesn't yet. Okay, so yeah, the operational cost of our economy actually uses no steel whatsoever. So we just generate 1 unit of steel per turn with no expenditure. But the expenditure for steel tends to be in lump sums. You know, it's going to be every time we lay the foundations of a factory, a huge amount of steel is used. Certainly once we start getting railroads. So we want to stockpile maybe 150 to 200 units of steel. So we've got a decent stockpile because each kind of territory that develop railroads are very expensive. And what they yield is really, really good. They represent in any given region a massive qualitative leap in terms of the productive capacity of that region. So for example, Constantinople, where virtually all of our industry is centralized, will become something very, very different on the basis of laying a railroad there. So that's going to be the first place we are going to build a railroad. A fairly kind of curt, brief business report this time then. I don't want to make every video a kind of 40 or 50 minute video because, I mean, I probably wouldn't myself sit and watch, you know, one guy ramble on about the Ottoman Empire for kind of 40 minutes every night. So, yeah, this is just really kind of checking in so that you can see that we've passed turn from early Jan to late Jan. What I'll do after this is I'll pass turn and the next video will begin in early Feb. So we can look at the hope is that Omar Pasha, nothing sort of unpredictable happens here. The fact we've got a British force there, I'm hoping kind of like provides him with security. And I think in a fortnight, on the basis of billeting inside the town to protect his force from the really difficult kind of hostile weather, this will allow his force to significantly increase organisation, morale and cohesion. And on that basis, I think in February, he will be in a position to kind of make a move against the Russians, either in Varna or Plevna, or frankly, both. If the Russian disposition is the same, if we attack, for example, Paskovich in Varna, the force in Plevna would come to his aid anyway. If we could inflict a significant enough defeat in Varna, we may even be able to then move on. We may even kind of move to Varna and then from there into Plevna, which would be... It'd serve to engage the Russians twice, especially if they fell back into Plevna. And that could be really, really devastating. But we need good organisation. We're going to see what happens with the weather as well a little bit. If the weather's really poor, we may only be able to move to Varna. But we'll keep an eye on that situation. But yeah, I think even if he's surrounded and attacked at his current level of organisation and the fact that he's got hold at all costs, he should be fine. And we've got enough supplies to keep us there for a while. So I'll leave it there. Next video, early Feb, and by then, yeah, Ritsu will be in Erzurum, and Omar will be ready to roll, and yeah, also by then, Mehmed Rashid Pasha, our newest staff commander, will have joined Ritsu Pasha in the east outside Erzurum. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.